There are moments in life where the battles you face feel too heavy for your strength. You try to stay strong, but exhaustion creeps in. You try to keep faith, but fear whispers louder. You try to push forward, but obstacles keep rising. And slowly, a question forms in your heart: how much longer can I fight this alone? Many believers carry battles silently, battles in their minds, battles in their families, battles in their finances, battles in their health, battles no one else sees but that weigh heavily on their spirit. And when the pressure builds, it becomes easy to feel isolated, as if you are the only one standing in the fight. But there is a truth many forget in the middle of struggle. You were never meant to fight your battles alone. From the beginning, God never designed humanity to carry the full weight of life's warfare by themselves. His role was not just creator, it was defender, protector, and deliverer. When you belong to God, your battles do not remain yours alone, they become His concern. This does not mean challenges disappear instantly, but it means you are not standing in them without divine involvement. God fights in ways you cannot see. There are spiritual confrontations happening beyond physical visibility. There are attacks being blocked before they reach you. There are plans being dismantled before they manifest. He works behind the veil of what human eyes can perceive. Many times, believers panic because they only evaluate battles by what they see physically. They measure opposition by visible intensity, but spiritual warfare is not limited to what is seen. Just because you see pressure does not mean God is absent. In fact, some of the fiercest divine interventions happen quietly, without announcement, without spectacle, without your awareness. There are dangers you never encountered because God intercepted them. There are traps you never fell into because God redirected your path. But because you never saw the confrontation, you assume you fought alone. Another truth about God fighting your battles is that His methods differ from human methods. Humans fight through force, argument, control, and visible strategy. But God fights through alignment, timing, influence, and unseen orchestration. He can shift outcomes without confrontation. He can change hearts without conflict. He can open doors without struggle. Because His authority operates beyond human systems. There are battles you are trying to win through stress that God intends to resolve through surrender. Because not every battle requires your effort, some require your trust. This is why faith becomes crucial in warfare seasons. Faith allows you to remain steady even when you cannot see movement. It allows you to rest internally while God works externally. Faith says, even if I don't see it, God is fighting for me. There is also protection embedded in divine warfare. God does not only fight battles you are aware of, He fights battles you are unaware of. He guards your destiny from threats you never detect. Some delays you experienced were actually divine shields. Some closed doors were defensive strategies. Some frustrations were protective interruptions. What felt like opposition was actually preservation. As we continue deeper into this teaching, you will begin to understand how God fights, when He fights, and how to position yourself so you are not resisting the very protection He is releasing. Because when God fights for you, outcomes change in ways human strength could never produce. There is a powerful shift that happens in a believer's life when they stop seeing every battle as theirs to win and start understanding which battles belong to God. Many people exhaust themselves fighting wars they were never meant to fight. They stress over outcomes they cannot control. They carry emotional weight that was never assigned to them, and over time, this constant striving drains their peace, their faith, and their strength. But when you understand that God fights for you, everything begins to change, not because battles disappear, but because your posture within them transforms. God does not fight the way humans fight. Human warfare is loud, visible, and force-driven. It relies on confrontation, retaliation, and personal effort. But divine warfare operates on a completely different dimension. God fights through orchestration. He shifts circumstances without announcement. He rearranges outcomes quietly. He positions the right people at the right time. He removes obstacles before you even encounter them. Many victories God gives you happen silently. You do not always see the negotiations happening behind the scenes. You do not see the spiritual confrontations taking place beyond your awareness. You only experience the result: doors opening, dangers avoided, outcomes changing. And because you did not witness the process, you may underestimate the protection involved. Another way God fights your battles is through timing. There are confrontations you want resolved immediately, but God delays engagement until the moment guarantees maximum victory, because premature confrontation can complicate outcomes. God does not just fight, He chooses when to fight. Timing allows Him to dismantle opposition completely rather than temporarily. It ensures that when victory manifests, it is sustained, not short-lived. This is why patience is often required while God fights. While you are waiting, He is aligning factors you cannot see. He is allowing certain events to unfold so that when intervention happens, it produces irreversible results. There is also the dimension of God fighting through influence. He can shift people's hearts without conflict. He can turn decisions in your favor without argument. He can open conversations that lead to unexpected breakthroughs. You may think you convinced someone, but God softened them. You may think opportunity appeared randomly, but God positioned it. He fights through invisible persuasion. Another powerful way God fights is through protection rather than confrontation. Not every battle is meant to be fought head-on. Some are meant to be avoided altogether. God closes doors, redirects paths, and interrupts plans to keep you from entering confrontations that would harm you. Avoided battles are still victories. But because humans often equate victory with visible confrontation, they misinterpret avoidance as loss. In reality, God preserved you from unnecessary warfare. There are also battles God fights through delay. You may be asking Him to act now, but He sees that waiting weakens the opposition. Time exposes hidden motives. Time dissolves certain threats. Time allows truth to surface naturally. So what feels like inaction is actually strategic patience. God allows opposition to reveal itself fully before dismantling it completely. Another truth many believers must understand is that God fights battles that human strength cannot win. There are spiritual attacks, generational patterns, and unseen forces that cannot be confronted through effort alone. They require divine authority. This is why prayer becomes essential in warfare seasons. Prayer does not always remove battles instantly, but it invites God's involvement into them. It positions Him as defender while you remain anchored in faith. When you pray, you are not just speaking, you are activating divine participation. But there is also responsibility on your side. While God fights spiritually, you must remain aligned emotionally and mentally. Fear, panic, and impatience can disrupt your peace even while God is working. Faith stabilizes your posture, while God secures your outcome. As we move into the next part, we will go deeper into how to position yourself when God is fighting for you, how to remain still without becoming passive, how to trust without becoming careless, and how to discern when to stand firm versus when to step forward. Because divine warfare is not just about God fighting, it is about you understanding your role while He does. When you begin to understand that God is fighting your battles, the next question naturally becomes, what is your role while He fights? Because trusting God's warfare does not mean becoming passive, careless, or disengaged. It means learning the difference between responsibility and control. It means knowing where your effort ends and where your trust begins. Many believers struggle here. Some try to fight everything themselves, exhausting their strength. Others withdraw completely, assuming they have no role at all. But divine warfare requires balance and partnership between your faith posture and God's authority. One of the first positions you must learn is spiritual stillness. Stillness is not inactivity, it is internal stability. It is the ability to quiet fear while circumstances remain loud. It is the refusal to panic even when pressure rises. When God fights for you, anxiety becomes unnecessary warfare. Fear tries to convince you that you must act urgently or everything will collapse. But stillness says, God is in control even when I don't see movement. Stillness protects your peace while God secures your outcome. Another critical posture is trust. Trust is what allows you to release outcomes you cannot control. It is the confidence that God's strategy is better than your reaction. It frees you from the burden of trying to force solutions prematurely. Because forcing outcomes can interfere with divine timing. When you trust God's warfare, you stop manipulating situations. You stop trying to defend yourself in every conflict. You stop exhausting your energy proving your case when God has already taken responsibility for your vindication. Trust allows God to fight without your interference. But trust must be paired with obedience. There are moments when God instructs you to step forward, to speak, to act, to move. And there are moments when He instructs you to remain still. Discernment is knowing the difference. Obedience ensures you are aligned with His strategy rather than acting out of emotion. Sometimes God fights by instructing you to walk away from certain battles, not because you are weak, but because the battle itself is unnecessary for your destiny. Walking away is not defeat when God directs it, it is wisdom. Another important posture is guarding your words. When God is fighting for you, careless speech can weaken your faith posture. Complaining, declaring defeat, or speaking fear amplifies anxiety instead of trust. Your words must align with your belief that God is working. Even when you feel pressure, your confession should reflect confidence, because what you speak influences your inner stability while God handles external outcomes. Faith-filled speech reinforces peace. There is also strength in maintaining spiritual disciplines while God fights. Prayer keeps your heart connected. Worship keeps your perspective elevated. Scripture keeps your mind anchored. These disciplines do not replace God's warfare, they sustain you while He fights. They ensure your spirit remains steady even when battles are intense. Another dimension of positioning yourself correctly is patience. Divine warfare does not always produce instant visible results. There are battles being fought in realms you cannot measure by time. Outcomes are forming beneath the surface before manifestation occurs. Patience prevents premature reactions. It allows God's process to unfold fully, because partial victories often require repeated confrontation, but complete victories come through sustained divine strategy. There is also humility required in this posture. Humility acknowledges that God's ways are higher than yours, that His understanding exceeds your perception, that His approach may look different from what you would choose, but it will always produce better outcomes. Humility releases control and embraces trust. And as you remain still, trust deeply, obey faithfully, guard your words, maintain discipline, and walk in patience, something begins to happen internally. Peace stabilizes. Even while battles exist externally, your inner life remains steady. Anxiety loses authority. Fear weakens its grip. Confidence rises, not in your strength, but in God's defense over your life. And this peace becomes evidence that God is indeed fighting for you. Because when God fights, one of the first victories you experience is internal before it becomes external. As we move into the final part, we will step into what happens when God's warfare produces visible outcomes, how victory manifests, how opposition collapses, and why battles fought by God end differently from battles fought by human strength. Because when God fights for you, the ending is never uncertain. There comes a moment when the battle that once felt endless begins to shift. It does not always happen with noise. It does not always come with warning. But slowly, unmistakably, you begin to see evidence that God has been fighting for you all along. Situations that looked permanent begin to change. Opposition that looked immovable begins to weaken. Doors that refused to open suddenly respond. And you realize that while you were worrying, God was working. Divine victory often unfolds differently from human victory. When humans win battles, there is usually struggle, visible confrontation, and emotional exhaustion. But when God fights for you, the outcome often comes with peace, clarity, and stability rather than chaos. Because God does not just win battles, He resolves them completely. He removes the root, not just the symptom. He dismantles opposition, not just delays it. He establishes outcomes that do not require constant defense. This is why victories won by God feel different. They come with finality. Another thing you begin to notice when God fights your battles is that some victories happen without you ever knowing the full story. There were plans formed against you that never reached you. There were conversations about you that God silenced. There were attacks arranged that collapsed before manifesting. You never saw the confrontation, but you experienced the protection. God fights battles you are aware of, and battles you are completely unaware of. This realization builds deep gratitude because you understand that your safety, your stability, and your progress were never sustained by your strength alone. They were sustained by divine defense. You also begin to see how certain delays were actually strategic victories. What felt like God not acting was actually God waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. Because premature intervention might have required repeated conflict, but delayed intervention produced complete resolution. God does not rush warfare, He perfects it. There is also a strengthening that comes after battles God has fought for you. Your faith grows deeper, your trust stabilizes, your fear reduces, because experience becomes your evidence. You have seen God defend you before, so you trust Him to do it again. You no longer panic when battles arise, because history has shown you that God steps in faithfully. Victory builds confidence in divine protection. Another powerful outcome of God fighting your battles is the peace that replaces anxiety. Even when new challenges arise, you carry inner stability, not because life becomes battle-free, but because you understand you are never battle alone. Peace becomes your default posture. You stop trying to control everything. You stop exhausting yourself proving your case. You stop reacting impulsively to every confrontation. Because you trust that God's defense is more effective than your reaction. This trust transforms how you live. You walk with confidence rather than fear. You face challenges with calmness rather than panic. You move forward knowing that even when opposition appears, it does not have final authority over your outcome. Because God is your defender. As this teaching closes, understand this truth deeply. God fighting your battles does not mean you will never face warfare. It means warfare will never face you without divine backing. You may encounter resistance, but you will not stand alone in it. You may face opposition, but it will not prevail beyond what God permits. His involvement changes the outcome before the battle even concludes. So when pressure rises, remember you are not abandoned. When challenges intensify, remember you are defended. When fear tries to speak, remember God is fighting for you even when you cannot see it. Your role is to remain still internally, trust deeply, obey faithfully, and allow God to execute His strategy without interference. Because when God fights for you, victory is not a possibility, it is a certainty in progress. If this message has strengthened your faith, encouraged you in your battles, or reminded you that you are not fighting alone, take a moment to support the channel. Like this message, share it with someone who needs reassurance in their struggles, leave a comment about what spoke to you most, and subscribe so you don't miss the next teaching that will continue building your spiritual life. And always remember, the battles you see are not yours alone. God is fighting for you.